So here we are at Lucknow, in Buckinghamshire, I believe it must be. It's heading out between London and Oxford. It's quite a pretty little village. I'm not quite sure why I started the race down this little side road. There's a lovely pub over the road there, which the camera isn't picking up to its full glory. The old leathern bottle. I don't know why it's not a leather bottle and it's a leathern bottle, but there it is. Now, from a West London VR race 4.4 preview point of view, this course is almost dead flat. There's one little rise, and if you have looked at the profile, because it's so flat, the rise sort of gives the impression of being bigger than it really is, but you are not going to notice the rise in this race. It comes fairly early. It's not steep and it's not long and it's not going to shake up the race. So we're going for sprint finishes here, and consequently there's not a lot I can really advise you in terms of attack points during the race, because I think it's going to stick together and be as I say, a sprint finish. Now, this set of roads is situated in the Aylesbury Vale, or Vale of Aylesbury, or whatever they call it. Essentially, we're heading out northwest of London, and between London and the Aylesbury Vale are the Chiltern Hills, and they get to their highest point just before this vale, which is dead flat, and there's a whole ridge of hills just behind us that runs almost from Reading up to Luton. I mean, I don't know, maybe 40-50 miles I'm guessing, and after you get over these hills and then it's just dead flat, not quite all the way to Oxford. There are a couple of lumps between the Chiltern Ridge, as it's known, and Oxford, but we're just going to sail around this flat vale, as I say, Aylesbury Vale, and we're broadly between the towns of Thame and Aylesbury. And Thame always intrigues me because it's the River Thames, but it's the town with the same name minus the S is Thame. But there we are. And as I say, this is pretty much the view you're going to get for most of the ride. Unfortunately, the GoPro doesn't do it justice because it's sitting on the handlebars, and therefore the tops of the hedges obscure the view, which you occasionally get there, and you can see that the crops have been harvested in those fields, and we're going to see a few tractors along the way. As I say, the GoPro doesn't quite get the views that you get when you're sitting up on the bike, because you see over the hedges and the GoPro doesn't. I'm not sure how to solve that problem, because if I put the GoPro on the helmet, you're going to see my handlebars every time I look down at the Garmin. You're going to see side views and sort of all over the place every time I look around and look at traffic. So I think it's better on the handlebars, but it doesn't particularly do this ride justice, because it's quite a nice little ride when you're actually doing it, and you can get some speed up because it's fairly flat, and you go through some pretty little villages or hamlets and isolated houses along the way. So it is one of my favourite rides. It's a shame it takes so long to ride out of London to get to the start, but once you're there, it's quite an enjoyable little spin around these roads. Now, as I say, there's not a lot of note along the way. It is going to be largely roads like this with hedges either side, almost dead flat, and a few junctions here and there, and there's not a lot to add. However, to keep the interest up, this race is called Tiggywinkles Tempest, and the name Tiggywinkles, I mean, you're probably aware of, I think Mrs. Tiggywinkle was one of the Beatrice Potter characters, I think. Anyway, Mrs. Tiggywinkle was a cartoon hedgehog in a book anyway. And Tiggywinkles Animal Wildlife Hospital is where this race finishes. Now, I have to say, I wasn't the most knowledgeable about Tiggywinkles, but I gather, having done this, that it is actually quite a well-known wildlife hospital. In fact, one of the leading ones in the world, which I hadn't realised. I'm now looked at by people such as my wife and saying, "What, you've never heard of that?" Well, I had heard of it because I kept seeing signs for it when I rode around this area. I didn't quite realise what they did until very recently, and I designed the route. If you're not aware of Tiggywinkles, it is a wildlife hospital, and essentially it's something like a veterinary surgeon or a veterinary hospital, but you can only bring wild animals that you found. So if you are driving along and you happen to bash into a deer, you can put the deer in the boot and take it to Tiggywinkles, assuming you're nearby, and assuming the deer will fit in the bike, in the back of the car. Anyway, that's essentially it. And when I did get to the end and I stopped, and I stayed there for something like an hour, and it was quite amazing how many people were bringing in injured animals that they'd discovered. A few birds. I mean, one lady came in with a pigeon that had fallen out of its nest, and she'd had to sort of feed it and rear it as a baby. And she said it could fly, but it wasn't feeding well, and wanted the vets to look at it. There were other things coming in, various animals that had been hurt one way or another. As I say, it was quite interesting, the stream, the volume of animals coming in. So I was quite impressed by this, and I did ask the staff there. I didn't film them because I think they were a little bit concerned about being filmed, so unfortunately we haven't got too much footage of the place itself. But there is a visitor centre there, and you can go around and you can look at it. It sounds a bit ghoulish to go around and look at sick animals, but I suspect they make it rather nice and a nice experience. But you pay to get in, which contributes towards the costs of running the animal hospital, and they take donations as well, so you can actually donate to it. And it was started, I think nearly 40 years ago, something like that. Certainly in the 1970s. It might be even longer than that. We'll get the date for you in a moment. And it actually started in a family's garden. They started taking in these animals, and they started repairing them, if that's the right word. And it just grew and grew and grew. And in the end, they outgrew their back garden and had to find proper premises. And it turned into not only a veterinary wildlife hospital, but it's also now a teaching hospital. It's one of the biggest in the world or Europe, depending on how you measure it, and it certainly is the leading teaching hospital for wildlife rescue. So well done. Quite an amazing place. It's a shame we didn't get more footage of it, but they were a little bit worried about I don't know what they were worried about, but they certainly like everything to be seen to be above board in terms of GDPR. If you're not from Europe, that's the data protection regime that burdens us all every time we go on the internet these days. Thank you very much for that one, politicians. And I think the other thing that they might have been a bit worried about is there's always somebody out there who wants to have a go at somebody for some sort of malpractice. And I think if you are dealing with life, even if it's not human life, there is a certain amount of you don't really want people looking to make bad news documentaries, do you? So anyway, it's a wonderful place, and you can donate if you wish. It's all run on the goodwill of people supporting it. And I made an effort to go into the visitor centre and buy something to eat and drink, and to keep the change. So my small contribution today hopefully will put a plaster or a bandage around a pigeon's foot or something like that. I gather they do get a lot of hedgehogs, and I suppose the name Tiggywinkles is therefore very, very appropriate. So we continue, lots more hedges, flat roads, and reasonably decent road surface, not perfect. This is Buckinghamshire, they're not renowned for their road maintenance out in these parts. So we head towards Tiggywinkles still, and going back to the point I was raising earlier, it was actually founded in 1978 in the garden of Les Stocker and his family in Aylesbury, but they had to go around making lots, selling things at car boot sales, bric-a-brac sales, things like that, and making ends meet and funding it was quite hard work. And eventually, both British Telecom and BP, British Petroleum, came along and gave them some big grants and enabled them to build this hospital. And that was opened in, I believe, 1991. So from the point we're making this video, the current hospital has been there 30 years now. I dare say that the fact that BP, a petroleum company, gave them money is probably something that was quite acceptable in 1991, but probably upsets a few eco-warriors these days. Nevertheless, that's who helped fund it, them telecom company, and it's been running well ever since. I think the fact that it's grown, by all accounts, has led to lots and lots more people bringing along animals, so the demand's got higher, and I think they're ever under pressure to do this. But of course, with reputation growing, hopefully the donations grow, and maybe at the end of this, you might like to go online and look at it, and who knows, make your own donation. We all have our favourite charities, but I think this one's quite a good one. I suppose it's limited in the fact that you have to live within 20-30 miles to get an injured animal to the hospital, but as I said earlier, the rate people were bringing them in while I was there suggests that there is a lot of demand. I also chatted to one of the management outside. Again, it wasn't filmed, but he described it almost as a conveyor belt of making animals better and treating them accordingly. So as I say, I think it's a marvellous charity, and I'm quite happy that the race is named after this, and if you haven't heard of it before, bring it to your attention. And as I say, it's probably going to fill out a little bit of the commentary, because this is, as you can see, still dead flat. I mean, it's a fantastic ride. I love coming out to the Vale of Aylesbury and doing all these roads, but there's not a lot really that you need to see from a race preview point of view. Mind you, this was entertaining. I did like this lady who curtsied as I went by. So there is some novelties. You won't get that on the RGT race, I'm afraid. The official race is not going to have any ladies curtsying at the side of the road. And anyway, you should be so focused looking forward that you wouldn't have noticed anyway under race conditions. Love this little village, Sydenham, quite pretty. Unfortunately, it's got a bit of building work further up, so it's not looking at its best this summer, as you can see the building works, but generally quite a nice little village, that one, and I've certainly stopped and enjoyed the village green there on a ride in the past. But no gradient. Well, I suppose there's a very slight gradient as you go up to the village green, but you're not even going to notice on RGT. You see these wooden houses here where they convert barns into houses. We've been past a few, and it does seem to be a modern trend to turn these old farm buildings into living accommodation, and very nice some of them look too. I'm not sure how much work that involves and what condition the barns are in, and turning them into habitable places entails, but as I say, I think it's a good use of buildings that I assume were just unused outbuildings hitherto. Now, when one goes out and records these, you don't quite race at race speed, and of course you have the junctions to contend with, which slow you down, so they take a little bit longer than they actually do when you race them on RGT. But as we go through here, Emmington, I think, and this pub on the corner, which looks isolated, but I think there's a little village. If you went right and then left, there's population, but it looks like one of those forlorn pubs that's kind of got left on a corner without lots and lots of custom, but it's still open, so I assume it's doing something right. Like I was saying though, they take slightly longer to ride than they do when you actually race them on RGT, but on this occasion what really took up the time was when I actually got to Tiggywinkles. One of the guys bringing in a wounded animal started chatting, and it turned out that he was a keen cyclist who goes out several days a week cycling in these parts, and inevitably we started talking about group sets, we started talking about races, we started talking about everything cycling, and I don't know how many hours we stood and chatted in the car park, but it certainly prolonged this ride, and I got home at the end a lot later than I had anticipated, but it was very pleasurable, and we're going to catch Peter Sims, the man I was speaking to, coming up right now. Hi there, and we've just met you. What's your name?
My name's Peter Sims. I'm a member of Bicester Millennium Cycling Club. I've just come over to Tiggywinkles to bring over an injured dove, which unfortunately my cat caught.
Oh.
So hopefully it will survive, but we'll have to see.
So if you're not aware, Bicester Millennium are a very, very active club out in this area. Bicester is just to the east of Oxford, a smaller town than Oxford, but a massive biking club. Check it out.
If you ever come over to the Bicester way, because I'm quite keen on cycling and I go out most days now that I'm retired, with the club and without the club, and we've normally got very, very interesting rides from Bicester out into the countryside, varying from 30 to 60 miles on a Saturday morning and a Sunday morning.
I've seen your club out on Saturday and Sunday mornings when I've been up your way, I have to say. Yeah. And so what's the big event happening in Bicester this October?
Bicester on the 4th of October.
So your chance to win absolutely nothing in our unsponsored competition. What's happening on the 4th of October? National Oily Chain Day. All potholes will be repaired, or perhaps the Women's Tour of Britain starts in Bicester. Ooh. Check this out after the break. And the same voice on the advertising break here. This is West London VR Series 4, and there are details online at www.westlondoncycling.com of all the races and all the dates. Essentially, it's every other Wednesday here on RGT, 7:30 UK time. Check it out. And just in case anybody did think it was National Oily Chain Day, the answer was the Women's Tour of Britain starts in Bicester, 4th of October.
Okay. On the 4th of October, Bicester is hosting the start of the Women's Tour of Britain, which is a 8-day stage race. It's starting in Bicester and finishing in Banbury. They're doing 150 kilometres on the first stage.
Sounds like something to ride out to.
So it'll be something interesting if anybody in cycling would like to ride out, and wish the girls all the luck and safe riding.
Excellent. Cheers.
Okay.
Now, of course, it does rather depend whether you're watching this video before or after 4th of October 2021, because if you're watching nearer the race date in November, of course that will have already happened, and the answer might be a little bit clearer if you took an interest in the Women's Tour race. Well worth checking out. You can get the details if you are watching beforehand on womenstour.co.uk, and the Women's Tour does attract some of the better international women riders, and it probably has higher status in women's cycling than, say, the Men's Tour does in men's cycling, although I am rather excited to note that at the time of recording this, and of course this will have happened before the actual race on RGT that we're running, I see that people like Mark Cavendish and Julien Alaphilippe are down to ride the Tour of Britain. Alaphilippe, a former winner actually, So it's quite nice for us Brits to see some of our favourite stars, and let's face it, how can anyone not love Julian Alaphilippe, a water rider, and a bit of character there too. So looking forward to that at the time of recording, and by the time you watch, it'll probably all have happened, and no doubt what I've just said will somehow or other be wrong because he didn't turn up for one reason or another, but hopefully he has, and we wish him well. Could be his second win of the British Tour, who knows. So back to the RGT race, West London VR Race 4.4 preview. Road's still flat, this one reasonably well tarmacked. We're in Towsey. Towsey has each year something they call the Towsey Fringe. Now I don't think that anytime soon this is going to rival the world famous Edinburgh Fringe, because I think it involves a few local bands and a few other local entertainers. I gather for 2021 they're introducing there it is, the pink sign there on your left, that's the Towsey Fringe venue as far as I'm aware. I believe they have a silent disco where you basically wear headphones and dance to your own music, and it's basically what teenagers do in their bedroom anyway, isn't it, I think. So paying to go out and do that seems a little bit of effort, but I suppose you get to mix with other people from the village and the surrounding area. So I think they have a few cover bands, this silent disco, I think there's food and drink. It's, I think, glorified village fete with lots of entertainment, and as I say, I gather most of the bands are cover bands, and I'm sure that's very, very good for a local sing-along. And I suppose if everybody in the village is involved, nobody complains about the noise. Or is there one grumpy old person at the edge of the village who dissents and doesn't like anybody having fun? There's usually one, isn't there? So we're still on the straight and not so narrow, and as I say, this is of no real, I suppose, tactical interest in terms of the race, and you've probably seen more hedges than you really want. This is a little bit of a main road. It always amuses me that we must be in Oxfordshire at this moment, and the road doesn't seem too bad. And then very shortly, we go through a sign saying Buckinghamshire, and almost on cue, right after the sign telling you you're in Buckinghamshire, the road surface gets very bumpy. So get ready for a shaky camera for a moment as we pass the Buckinghamshire sign, and they let us know that we're in proper Buckinghamshire because the road surface is rubbish, which seems to be a trait that Buckinghamshire takes rather proudly, and it probably explains why so many people with Buckinghamshire drive around in a 4x4 to protect themselves. Here we are, nice green sign, and it probably says birthplace of the Paralympics, and we shake the camera around over the rough tarmac. Actually, on this occasion, it levels itself out quite nicely afterwards. The birthplace of the Paralympics, and the reason is that the 1948 Olympics, immediately after the Second World War, took place in London, and at that time there were so many soldiers had come back with various injuries and amputations and so on and so forth. There were a lot of young fit people who had various injuries, so I think one of the pioneering doctors got involved, and up in Stoke Mandeville, which is a specialist hospital for this sort of thing, which is near Aylesbury in this area, put on the very first Paralympic Games. And of course now every Olympics is followed by Paralympic Games, but they were actually born up here in this area at Stoke Mandeville, which as I say is a very specialist hospital and world renowned. In fact, I know people who've been there with spinal injuries, and it's very highly thought of. So another one of these sort of left turns, but I'm afraid it's just going to take you down more lanes. Nice and traffic free, as I say. It's a lovely area to ride if you just want to go out for a flat spin and get some speed up on quiet roads. You can't beat the Aylesbury Vale, that's for sure. Terrific place to come and do a bit of flat riding as we go around another 90-degree bend. I think there's another one just further up here if I remember rightly. So I certainly remember the other day coming up this road, and somebody had very conveniently parked on the bend so nobody could see round it, and it was causing a bit of a mess. I think that's because there's a house on the corner that's having some work done. As you can see, yes, there's some scaffolding there, so a lorry just parked itself here and nobody could sort of get around the bend. So here we are, and that's not the most interesting fact you're going to glean from this commentary, but not a lot happens around here, as you can tell. Certainly in terms of hills, climbs and so on and so forth. But we are getting towards the end, so the thing is there's probably let's say it's always going to be a sprint finish, and it's going to be on a road not dissimilar to this, but there is a left-hand turn just before the finish, so be aware that positioning on that left-hand turn is probably something you want to get right, but I would say there's still enough road left to rectify any, if you do fall behind on the braking on that corner, don't worry about it too much. I think there's enough road left to catch up again. And in fact, actually, as you'll see when we get up to this road, I was not paying attention and I nearly missed the road. So, let's say, pay more attention than I did. Some nice bumpy roads. Buckinghamshire, can't beat it. As I say, we're getting ever closer to the finish. We're not too far away now. I'm not exactly sure how far, but as I say, there's not a lot that's going to happen here of note other than watching me suddenly swerve because I nearly missed the turn, the left-hand turn to the sprint finish, which takes us right up and we finish outside the gates of Tiggywinkles Tempest. As I say, tiggywinkles.com is the website if you want to go on there and find out all about it. You can donate, you can take injured wild animals. They're not your pets, they've got to be wild animals. And there is a visitor centre, and I think it's £6.90 to get in, £4.90 for concessions, I think if you're over 66 and under 17. And it looked really, really good, but I decided that I needed to get back home and was in a hurry, which never happened because I got stuck in the car park talking about bikes. But I think that's a valid excuse for getting home late, and I'm sure that most people watching this will thoroughly agree with that. Bike talk is very important for our cycling careers, albeit amateur. As we go around that little bridge, a bit more rough tarmac as Buckinghamshire takes pride in. Yeah, look at that. Wavy tar. I mean, it's not even treed here. I mean, how it gets like that, I'm not really sure. Anyway, as I say, it's going to be fast and furious, this race. It's about 16 kilometres just over, and tractors. It's noticeable, actually. You can tell that this was filmed in late summer, and a lot of the fields, if you have been paying attention, you'll have seen a bit have been cropped, and you know, all the corn or whatever they were growing being harvested, and you'll see the tractors sort of taking this from wherever to wherever else, whether it's barn to barn, or maybe the local guy who sells it all for them. But yeah, this was late summer. Not a particularly great day in terms of weather, but it was quite pleasant cycling. In fact, if anything, not too hot, so quite enjoyable. Now we are actually coming up to this left-hand turn, the one that I'm almost going to miss, as you see here. I was nodding to the other cyclist, suddenly realised the turning was there. Did an obscene manoeuvre on the wrong side of the road, but it kept the continuity going, and I'm sure you're very, very grateful for that. Luckily, nothing coming the other way. We're now on the road to Tiggywinkles. I mean, this is probably 700 metres, I would guess, from that left-hander. And I mean, this is almost straight, not quite, this road. But as I say, we're very, very close. All that rough tarmac there, Buckinghamshire speciality, will be taken out by RGT and smoothed over for your cycling delight on the day. You can see a lot of houses being built on the right there. This is Heddenham in Buckinghamshire, and you'll see a brown sign coming up which says Tiggywinkles just on your left there, and we are pretty much now right outside. There's the drive. So we go in here. As I say, this is Europe's largest, I think, certainly teaching hospital for wildlife treatment, and is one of the leading wildlife hospitals both in Europe and around the world, I'm led to believe. And you can see there's a lady in pink there bringing in what was the pigeon I mentioned earlier, I think, which wasn't feeding properly. See you on the start line. Have fun.